Good evening. Welcome to the Linden Hills History Study Group's March 2022 event. Tonight's program is on the streetcars that ran on Nicollet Avenue from 1879 to 1954. This is the streetcar line that ran from downtown to the Ridgefield city limits. Minnesota Streetcar Museum historian Aaron Isaac will contrast historic photos from the same views taken in 2021. Aaron Isaac is a 40-plus year volunteer at the museum, where he serves as a historian, board chair, and a motorman. He is also a noted local author. His works include Streetcars by Twin Cities by Trolley, the Streetcar Era in Minneapolis and St. Paul, Twin Ports by Trolley, the Streetcar Era in Duluth and Superior, the Como Harriet streetcar line, the 1940s, Interurban Special number 14, and he's the longtime editor of the Minnesota Streetcar Museum's magazine, Twin City Lines, formerly the Mini Cassette. And Aaron has presented many very popular programs to us over the years. In the recent 5 years, his programs have included the Minneapolis Reuses the Railroad, Trench Warfare in Midtown Minneapolis from Railroad to Greenway, a presentation on Southwest Streetcar, and the Bryant Avenue Streetcar line. Welcome, Aaron. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for coming. This is like the third one of these. I did one on the Como Harriet Oak Harriet line, and I did one on the Bryant line, and now we're kind of working our way east at Nicollet. I don't know if there'll be an interest in going further east. I could kind of do these for every line in the city, but I know some of you, let me just see a show of hands. How many of you are here for a couple of those other ones? Okay. Very good. Well, let's get started. The Nicollet Avenue line did not actually run on Nicollet Avenue within downtown. There never were streetcars between Grant Street and the river. There were buses, but there were never streetcars. So it went through downtown on Marquette. And so here we're going to start. This is the corner of Washington and Marquette as you see it today. There's a Skyway. And the only thing on here that you can still see is the main post office, Art Deco building built in the 1930s, I think. So anyway, here's that exact same view as it was this is in the 1940s. You can tell by the cars. And so you can see you have all the buildings, all the Skid Row buildings that were all torn down in the course of the big urban renewal of the 1960s. There's a lot there. Anyone remember Nate's Clothing is in here somewhere?
It's not Hayes, wasn't it?
No, it's a different one now. I've seen Nate's has been in there at some time or another. Okay, well, we'll continue. Okay, so then you turn around. This is the corner of 4th Street. And there's not much that was here in 1954, but check this out. The parking ramp was there. That was the first parking ramp in downtown Minneapolis, at least as far as I know it was. There was another one that looked kind of similar to this and is still around, I think, over on, I want to say, 9th Street. 9th Street in LaSalle, that area. But that's parking lot. Okay. So we're going to keep moving south. This is the corner of 6th Street as it is today. And, of course, you have the F&M Bank and the Rand, thank you, tower. And this interesting little building, which has a big parking ramp built around it and a skyway going into it, but it has an Egyptian motif. And so now this is the same one. And there you can see the Egyptian motif. And this, by the way, is one of the PCC streetcars, one of the post-World War II streamlined streetcars that runs. We've still got one of these. We run it over at Lake Harriet. Okay, now this is the corner of 7th and Marquette, and that's the Wells Fargo building. And of course, my wife used to work in the old Northwestern National Bank building, and we were out at my parents in Roseville, and we came over the hill on I-35W, and we saw flames. And that was it burning down. And so, of course, it's been replaced by this one by Cesar Pelli. So anyway, here's that same view. A newspaper photographer took this. It was a really windy day, which is the reason that lady's having some trouble. But there's the Northwestern National Bank building in all its glory. It's a pretty nice building, and of course they did recycle some of the railings and stuff in the new building.
What caused the fire for it to burn down?
Arson, apparently, but as I understood, some kids got in there or something and started it. I don't know.
During down the old some apartments.
Maybe that was it. Oh, was that it, Ruth? That it was from the Downs?
Somebody must have snuck onto that demolition site.
Yeah. Okay. This is that same corner, and I love and this is that very same day with the wind. But I love this photo. You know, I mean, all these people, you can see how windy it was because the skirts are adhering. And back here, this is the Donaldson's building. Remember that facade facing the corner of 6th and Nicollet? So anyway, this is a cool picture. Okay, so now we are down at 10th. And 10th and Marquette looking north. And of course, it's all pretty much new stuff down there. This was the view. Now, I was on one side of the street, and it turns out I was trying by memory to get the angle, and I got it wrong. I was on the wrong side of the street. But it's the same corner. Marquette does this little bitty jog there. You got the Loop Pharmacy, the Fauché Tower, which is hidden in the newer view. Medical Arts Building. Schmidt Music. Oh, and of course, the Weather Ball. Yeah, okay. And, okay, we're at the corner of Grant and Nicollet. And we're looking east on Grant towards the Convention Center. And the building that survives in this is the Wesley Church. Now, the Wesley Church used to have an office building, the Wesley Temple office building next to it. So here was the view then. The church, as you can see, had something on top of the steeple. And so on Grant Street is the south end of downtown. And that's where the 45-degree street grid, which is aligned with the river, transitions to the straight north-south street grid all the way through South Minneapolis. And so the streetcar came down Marquette to Grant and then jogged over a block to Nicollet. And then from here on, we go straight south down Nicollet. Okay, so now we're looking south on Nicollet from, let's see, I guys have to orient myself, from 14th Street. Yeah, okay, from Grant. Yeah, I guess it would be. Yeah, that's right, because that's the corner of 14th right there, right by the Music Box Theater, or whatever they're calling it now. So here's what it was then. And I remember I drove taxi cab back around 1970, and this was a really seedy area back then. It isn't anymore. Now we're at 17th. We're basically at the freeway. For this picture, I'm standing on the south side of I-94 looking back towards downtown. And you can see, I mean, everything's new. You know, all kinds of new apartments and stuff like that. Here's the same view then. And of course, what you have here is 17th Street, which doesn't exist anymore. This is where the freeway is basically. Everything in here is the freeway. And this is back when they had the old style street signs that said 17th Street, and then I believe had the cross street above it. Kind of, that's a New York style sign. Okay. Okay, now we're turned around and looking the other way. And so we're still on the south side of I-94, and we're looking north, and we're kind of climbing the hill. This is 18th Street right here, and you can see a bunch of new apartments are going up. This was the old Johnson Meat Company site that had been vacant for quite a few years, and now it's got something new on it. And so here's that same view. Once again, this is the 17th Street that is gone now. And Southern Fried Chicken, how about that? And so anyway, you're looking up the hill. The streetcar is at about Franklin. And you can barely see what I think is the Plymouth Congregational Church steeple sticking up there. And of course, the street pavement itself. This is asphalt outside of the track area, and then the track area, and this wasn't 100% for everywhere, but this was kind of the standard for a lot of the system. It's granite, what they call Belgian block. And under the city franchise, the streetcar company had to maintain the pavement area in the track area. And then the city was responsible for the rest of it. That was one reason, by the way, they eventually got rid of streetcars, because they didn't get paid to do that. But anyway, every once in a while, they'll tear up a street, and underneath it are these Belgian blocks. And the Belgian blocks just disappear because they're like granite loaves of bread, and they're perfect for landscaping. Okay, we are at Groveland Avenue, which is 19th Street, looking towards downtown. And here's that same view today. Now, we do have a building that's the same, and that's this building. If you, these two buildings, if you look at the roof line, the stepped roof line, you can see the stepped roof line right there. What's interesting to go out is just to see what has survived. And so anyway, then you turn around, and the sun was kind of wrong when I took this, but that's Plymouth Congregational Church, which of course has been there for a long time. And here is what it looked like before. Really hasn't changed much. I think this building right here fronting Nicollet is gone. Let's go back and take a look at that. Yeah, it kind of looks like it's not there, doesn't it? Yeah, I think. I see grass.
I think that's where an addition to the church is.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now we're down at 26th Street. And 26th, this is Black Forest, thank you. The Black Forest building, and this is some kind of a restaurant right now. Oh, this is Black Sheep Pizza right now. Okay, here's where it was. So what do we got here? We've got the famous Butler Drug, which was here and then moved across the street, and then it became the Cheapo Records. And George's Cafe, whoever George is. This photo is from the Hennepin County Library collection. All right, now we're down at 27th Street, looking north. So we're working our way south. That was 26th. This is 27th. Somewhere out of Glam Doll Donuts is over here. And there's still this is the forest, the parking for Black Forest. So here's the same basic place. This is wintertime. This also illustrates the snow plows. They had these snow plows with the big wings on them. They had to plow the streets and for no compensation, which was another reason for converting to bus. They didn't have to do this anymore. But they had this big wing that would come out, and they could pretty much clear the street in two passes.
So is that a truck? That's actually a streetcar, isn't it?
You mean the vehicle, the plow? It's a specially built streetcar snowplow. And it had motors that were half again as powerful as a regular streetcar, and it weighed twice as much. And they had, I think, 17 of these. And they did a pretty effective job. Took a 3-person crew to run them.
How did that wing get out of the way of a car?
There's a hydraulic thing and a control inside. And there's a guy called the Wingman who is, I know, that's not the what you think of today when you think of a wingman. But, and his job was to go and operate that and pull it back in so you wouldn't hit the car.
When did the practice of towing cars off of snow emergency routes begin?
I don't know. What I do know is they had terrible problems with cars that were impinging just enough that they couldn't get streetcars by, especially on narrow streets like Grand Avenue and Bryant Avenue. And the plow crew had to get out, and this was back when automobile suspensions were pretty loose, and they would, are any of you old enough to remember bouncing a car? Where you'd get on the bumpers and you'd bounce it, and you'd literally move the car a few inches sideways. That's what these guys, they had to get out and do that. And we found a story in the Pioneer Press where they went out with one of these crews, and they wound up in the course of their shift bouncing 100 cars.
And they didn't get paid extra.
Not for that, no. Okay. So, there's the former Kmart, now the post office temporarily. So this is the corner of Lake and Nicollet. And boy, if there's a place where time has not been good to it, it's the corner of Lake and Nicollet. So I've got a couple of shots. This is the same angle as it was in like 1953. And I like the candy store in the corner, Northwestern Auto Parts. And I've got a couple of views here of this corner just because it was so cool. By the way, this is, in streetcar terms, this is what you call special work right here. All these switches and stuff. And so this is a view of that corner, and it's a newspaper view. You're looking east on Lake Street. This is Lake Street, and this is Nicollet. And the reason for the view is that this streetcar is derailed. He was over on these tracks. He's a Grand Avenue car. The Grand Avenue cars came up Grand Avenue, used Lake Street over to Nicollet, and took Nicollet downtown. And this guy derailed somehow, and it wound up on the wrong side of the street. And so this is the service truck from Nicollet Station, which is now the bus barn at 31st and Nicollet. And he's come over to try to tow this guy off. So, of course, this has attracted a crowd. But it also gives you a great view. I mean, there were two movie theaters at the corner, the American, and there was one on the west. Here's Zips Drugstore. I don't know if that's the same one that was later Zips Liquor in a different location. How many Zips could there be? Okay, now we're going to take a little diversion because the Nicollet Avenue line started in 1879 as a steam-powered narrow gauge railroad called the Linden Railway. And by narrow gauge, I mean 3 foot between the rails. And the streetcars were what they called standard gauge, 4 foot 8.5 inches between the rails. But anyway, electric streetcars did not become practical until 1889. And so before then, you either had to run it with horses or put in cable cars or steam locomotives. And so the Linden Railway, which later became Minneapolis, Lyndale, and Lake Calhoun, and then was extended to Lake Minnetonka and became Minneapolis, Lyndale, and Minnetonka. It had 3 lines. It started on Marquette, came out Nicollet Avenue to 31st Street. The line went across 31st, and that was the line to Lake Harriet and Lake Calhoun, and eventually Lake Minnetonka. But they had 2 other branches. They also continued going out Nicollet to 50th Street, which was where the orphanage was. That was at the Washburn Orphanage. And then they also had a line that branched off Nicollet at 37th Street, went across 37th to just beyond Hiawatha and out to Minnehaha Park. And they used these little steam locomotives. This is actually a steam locomotive. It's called in parlance a steam dummy. And the reason for calling it a dummy is that it has this fake passenger car body around the shell as a shell around the locomotive. Now the reason for doing that was a steam engine scared horses. And this was an attempt to come up with something that wouldn't scare the horses, because remember, it's puffing and hissing and blowing off steam. Now, for the most part, steam-powered street railways were fairly uncommon in the middle of the city because the residents hated them. And this line was hated by the residents from the day it opened in 1879, especially downtown. Downtown, the middle and upper part of downtown that we know today, from 6th Street down to Grant Street, actually was all residential and had a lot of big houses like mansions, one of which was one of the Washburns. And so this thing went right by his door. There was smoke and soot out of the steam, and if you've ever been around a steam engine, they throw off sparks and you could burn your clothing. Or if you put out your laundry, you'd get not only sparks on it, but soot on everything. And so from the day this thing opened, they were trying to shut it down. So this is the corner of 31st and Nicollet. And this is the junction where the line went west on 31st and south on Nicollet. And this is where the Nicollet Bus Garage is now. Okay, so we're going to backtrack a little bit. This is the downtown terminal down, it's either Washington or 3rd Street and Marquette, which was at the time 1st Avenue South. And so here you have the little steam motor, and it would haul sometimes 3 or 4 coaches. And they didn't run like every 10 minutes or 15 minutes. They ran like every hour or so. Oops, wrong button. So what happened is Washburn, did I say Washburn? Yeah. Washburn and the other residents were able to get, they hated the thing coming beyond 6th Street, and they were able to get a city ordinance passed that they had to cut off the steam engine at 6th Street and haul it the rest of the way down to Washington Avenue with horses. And this, we found this photo, this is a great photo, and we were at 6th Street, and that's the reason that you got to see everybody's on the ground, is they're about to cut off this steam engine and get it out of the way and put horses on to drag these coaches the rest of the way down. And you can see some of the, big mansions and stuff and a church right there. Okay, so during the mid-1880s, there were 3 different, there were more than 3, but there were a number of inventors who were trying to harness electricity to run streetcars. And one of them was a guy named Van de Poel. And his patents ultimately did not work out, but he wound up equipping a number of early streetcar systems with his patents. And he did an experimental one on Lower Marquette Avenue in 1885 and 1886. Ran it for a couple of months in each year. And this, they went and they hung everything they could behind this little electric locomotive to show. Now, all it was doing was running in downtown. But it wasn't successful. But anyway, this was only the second time, this was the first time anyone attempted in Minnesota to electrify a street railway, and it just didn't work. And so there was another guy named Frank Sprague whose patents were adopted nationwide beginning in 1889. This was 1885-86. And his patents became the standard. Van de Poel's, never went anywhere. They were the Betamax of electric trolleys. And the Sprague patents, the first one appeared in the Stillwater Street Railway in Stillwater, Minnesota in 1889, and then in late 1889, Minneapolis Street Railway electrified a line, and then in early 1890, St. Paul did, and then from there, in 2 years, they electrified the whole system. Oops. Okay, so this little railroad down at 31st and Nicollet, where the bus garage is, they had built a roundhouse in the mid-1880s. And so the streetcar company took over the roundhouse, and you can see these are electric streetcars in the roundhouse, and they made it their main shop. But it was not a particularly efficient building. And so that site has had a whole series. First on that side, and I don't know if I put it, okay, yeah, I did. And so they kept the roundhouse, but right next to it, they put what they called the 31st Street Station. They called their car barns stations. And so they built this car barn for streetcars in 1891. And this is inside of it. And this is about 1905. This is, and then they built next to that a streetcar factory. And this is inside the streetcar factory. And you can see they're building streetcars over here. They built 500 streetcars there from 1898 to 1907. And in 1907 they went, and the building was it was a fire trap. You can see it's all wood. They wanted fireproof buildings because they had a couple of car barns burned down. And so they went and built a whole new series of buildings, including a whole new streetcar factory where the soccer stadium is in St. Paul now. And so they built 500 cars here, built 700 cars over there, and then tore this down. Let's see, do I have the picture? Oh, but before they did that, they built the 6 streetcar boats, the express boats, for Lake Minnetonka. And they didn't build them completely. They haven't put on the upper deck, and they may not have put the engine in it yet. But what they've done is they have rigged up a dolly, and these are unpowered streetcar trucks, and then they're going to tow the thing, and they towed it right through Linden Hills, right down the Lake Harriet right-of-way, all the way out to Lake Minnetonka, put it in the water, and finished assembling it there. 6 of these things. That's right. They lowered the Berry Bridge because the Berry Bridge was originally not as much clearance. And they lowered it about 4 feet or so to do two things. One, to get the boats through, and two, they experimented with a couple of double-deck streetcars. So anyway, this is the only picture ever seen of these boats before they were launched. And here's one of the double-deck streetcars that they experimented with. And they did 3 of them, and they just didn't work. And there's something amazing in this photo. Look over in the corner here, and you see a railroad car there. And that's the Abraham Lincoln funeral car that transported Abraham Lincoln's body back to Illinois for burial. And it was built as the Air Force One of its day, although he never used it while he was alive. It was built shortly before he was assassinated. And it went to Illinois, and after that it was sold to the Union Pacific Railroad that used it as an official's car, and eventually it became obsolete and was downgraded to be kind of a maintenance car on the Union Pacific, and then it was purchased by a couple of 3 different private owners who displayed it at the St. Louis World's Fair. And Thomas Lowry, who built the streetcar system and owned it, was from Illinois. Lincoln had been Thomas Lowry's father's lawyer in Illinois, and he felt a real, he was kind of, Lincoln was his idol. As a matter of fact, according to the story, Lowry had a brother who was killed in the Civil War also, and so there was another. So Lowry found out that the car was for sale, and it wasn't in good shape. He had it brought up, since this was the main maintenance shop, and he put his son Horace Lowry on to restore it. And he had to go all over the country and find artifacts and missing components and stuff. So he restored it here. This picture is taken in 1905, and you can see they're working on it. They're fixing wood on the side. And when he got it done, he moved it up to the south edge of Columbia Heights, just north of Columbia Golf Course off Central Avenue and just south of 37th. And I don't know if I have the picture in here. No, I don't. And people would make pilgrimage to it. The Grand Army of the Republic, the Civil War veterans, would come and visit it. We have in our collection a brochure Twin City Lines put out showing how you could get to it by streetcar. And unfortunately, in 1911, a prairie fire came through and burned the thing to the ground. And I found newspaper articles where after it burned, people were going and collecting pieces of wood off it. The newspaper said somebody went and made a violin out of wood from the Lincoln funeral car. Who knows where that is today? So anyway, there's a big story. So after they shifted the streetcar factory over to St. Paul, they went and tore down the old car barn, and they built Nicollet Station, which is a modern fireproof building, concrete, steel, fire doors between the tracks. And they built several buildings to the same design around the city, replacing all their old car houses. And for a while, they kept the old roundhouse. And eventually, they tore most of the roundhouse down and expanded the car storage yard. And here you can see Nicollet in flowers. So you're at the corner of 31st and Nicollet. And the ballparks were moving kind of around the city at that time, and they wanted a new park for the Minneapolis Millers, and they also wanted good transportation. So they went and built it right across 30. This is 31st Street right here, and Lake Street is right down here, and here's Nicollet Avenue. So you can see nothing could be more convenient for storing streetcars to get the crowd after the game. And here's after the game. And what these cars would do, they would fan out all over the city to take people to all the neighborhoods. The other thing that they would do is on Memorial Day and 4th of July, and I think Labor Day, they would do these split double headers with the St. Paul Saints, where they'd start on one city and play a 10 o'clock game, and when the game was done, they'd all pile on the streetcars and go over to the other city and play another game about 3 p.m. And so here's the same view today. And of course, the Wells Fargo building that was burned down in the unpleasantness occupied the exact footprint of old Nicollet Ballpark. And it's probably still there. There's a plaque there that talks about the ballpark. And so the Nicollet Station became Nicollet Garage, and this is it in 1954 being converted into a bus garage. And so they added bus bays all around it, but they kept the old building, and the headquarters of Twin City Rapid Transit Company shifted from, they sold their office building. They actually had two of them. They had one over in downtown St. Paul and Wabasha, and they had the main one at 11th and Hennepin. So they sold those, and they moved into the upstairs there. And that's where, once it became Metro Transit moved in there. I worked in that building for about a decade before it was torn down. And there it is, viewed from Nicollet. Yeah, you'd go out here, and this is the old shop area, and the streetcar tracks were still in the floor. They were referred to as 1-track, 2-track, 3-track, 4, 5, and 6-track. But it was a pretty tired old building, and so Metro Transit in 1990 replaced it, and that's why you have a bus garage there today. Okay, now we'll keep moving out along Nicollet. Where am I? Oh, this is 36th and Nicollet. And my picture for my historic photo, I completely didn't know. I thought this was on Chicago Avenue, and I even put it in my book as on Chicago. Boy, was I wrong. And what fooled me is these buildings right here, these rather distinctive buildings. Use an oil burner. And if you go back, that's the U-Haul that's on the corner there. They just took all those buildings out. So I mean, I think this apartment is, yeah, that apartment is still there, and this building there is still there, but the rest of it is new. Okay, and so we're looking south from 36th Street, the same place we've just turned around. You might notice that this is where something new is going up. This was a gas station before. And we're looking down, you can see 38th Street down here. Now this photo is a little interesting. Oh, I'm sorry. This is that exact location. I forgot I had this one in here. There you can see the gas station. Okay, now we're closer. We're at 37th Street. And here's the cluster of businesses at 38th. And in 1914, we have a bunch of pictures of the dirt streets in the process of being repaved. And they had to go and rebuild the track, and this is before the pavement went down. And it's with a real telephoto lens, but it starts at 37th Street. And here's 38th Street right here where this car is in the storefront. I think this is still the storefront that's up there. What's interesting, because of the telephoto, is you see it dips down to 40th, and then it climbs up to 42nd, and then it goes up over the hill at 52nd Street to then go down to the creek. I love this picture. It's this because you can see so much. Oh, one thing you can see in here, this is an arc light, which was an early kind of street light that was powered right off the overhead wire. And they burned really bright. But they're also very high maintenance. All right, now we're down at 42nd Street. We're looking northeast at Martin Luther King Park. And here's the same view during a snowstorm. Probably doesn't look a whole lot different. Although, yeah. Okay, so the streetcar line for quite a while ended at 50th Street. That's where the old motor line, the steam line had ended, and that was where the Washburn orphanage was. And if you know the neighborhood south of there and especially west of there is Washburn Park, or Tangletown as we call it today, but it was developed as Washburn Park. And that's on the 3 or 4 blocks, well, about the 3 blocks between 50th Street and the creek. So this is the crew lane over there. They had a little waiting station. Okay, now we're up on top of the hill at about 52nd Street. And we're looking down. This is 50th Street down here. Justice Page, the former junior high school, is right around the corner. If you're into any kind of architecture and all that, these are the Lustron Houses. Thank you. The prefabbed metal, what's the word I want? No, what? Porcelain metal houses that are still there. And this is, Peter, am I correct? This is the largest concentration of these in the Twin Cities? And there's a couple others down the hill or something. And there's a couple in St. Paul, but there's like 3 or 4 of them in a row up here. Okay. Just a second, I need a drink here. Okay, so here's the view then. There's the Lustron Houses, and you're looking north. Okay, then you turn around, and you're looking down the hill to the Minnehaha Creek Bridge, and over here is the Harry Wild Jones house. And there it is, and that'd be about 1910. You can always tell if you see a picture of the streetcar with the gold leaf stripes on the side, that's between 1905, that's before 1920. That's one of the ways to date one of these photos. So here we are, going down and approaching the bridge. And here's the same view in about, 1954, I think. Now, there's another little story to tell here. Okay, now we're on the bridge. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself here. Looking north. And here's that same view. You can see they've replaced the railing of the bridge. It's not the same railing. Okay. Have you heard of the Dan Patch Railroad? Okay. Now, the Dan Patch Railroad originally, it was supposed to be what they called an interurban. And an interurban was taking the electric streetcar technology and using it to run between cities. And there was an interurban boom from about 1905 to about 1915. 15,000 miles of these things were built all over the United States. And the idea was that it was to catch the market, catch the market that the steam railroads couldn't handle. And at the time, people had mostly horses and horse and buggy. And so the idea was you would build what amounted to a trolley line through the country with stops set up every mile. Steam railroads would have a stop about every 5 to 10 miles. So the stops were more convenient for rural residents. You didn't have smoke and cinders. They were cheaper to operate. You could run one of these with 2 people instead of about a 3 or 4 person crew with a steam locomotive. They were nice and clean because they were electric, and so it was a niche market. So Marion Savage, that Savage is named after, he owned the horse Dan Patch, and he was a big-time promoter. He liked to promote stuff. So he built this railroad starting at the corner at the end of the streetcar line at 50th Street, where he met the streetcar. And he went out Nicollet to 60th, and then went over a quarter mile to the right-of-way of Pleasant Avenue, and followed the right-of-way of Pleasant Avenue all the way out to the Oxborough neighborhood in Bloomington, 98th and Lindale, where it turned and followed Old Shakopee Road to, I don't know if you know the Minneapolis Auto Club, but out there in the vicinity of Highway 100. And they built a swing bridge across the Minnesota River, which automobiles could use. You could drive on it up to about 1980. And then it went south through Savage, named for him, and then down through Burnsville, Lakeville, to Northfield. And he wanted to be an electric interurban, but he never got the money to electrify the thing. And so instead, he got what you would call, what they call a gas electric car. And that is exactly what a hybrid automobile is today. It's a gasoline engine that's generating electricity to power the motors on the axles of the car. And he went out and he bought a few of them, and he wanted to go all the way into downtown Minneapolis on the Nicollet Avenue streetcar line. But Twin City Lines wouldn't let him because his cars were not electrified yet. The other thing was he had built up Nicollet. Now remember that the city limits then for Richfield were at 54th Street, Diamond Lake Road. He built up into the city to 50th without a franchise approval from the city. And so a couple of things happened. First, the residents south of 50th said, we don't want this. We want streetcar service. We don't want something that runs 6 times a day. We want something that's running every 20 minutes. And so he built up there in 1910 to 50th, but in 1911, he agreed to pull his terminal back to 54th Street, and the streetcar company extended their service to 54th Street. The other reason for doing this, if you look at this photo, they're boarding passengers on the north end of the Minnehaha Creek Bridge. And here's the hill going up to 52nd and over. These cars, for the most part, didn't have enough power to get up that hill. And so one of two things had to happen. The passengers would come out on the streetcar to 50th and would either have to walk over the hill, or in this case, they had a small car which could go over the hill, and they just shuttled the people, and now they're getting on this thing. Ugh. So they pulled it back to 54th and built a station there. Now, if you notice the angle that this thing is on, that is the same angle as Diamond Lake Road. So this is the location of the Holiday Station that's at the corner of Diamond Lake Road and Nicollet. And so until 1922, from 1911 to 1922, they would transfer passengers here. Well, starting in 1915, this wasn't a great arrangement for the railroad trying to get people to downtown Minneapolis, make them transfer to a streetcar. And so starting in 1915, they built the railroad that goes up through the suburbs. It goes up through Edina. Well, it basically parallels Highway 100 a little bit to the west. And it goes up through Edina, up through St. Louis Park to Golden Valley. And there it met another line that it could take into downtown Minneapolis. And it ended right where Target Field is today. Well, actually right where the big A parking ramp is, next to Target Field. And once they did that and started running up there, it really dried up the passenger market here. Trains stopped running up to this point in 1922, and they cut it back to 60th. So if you go down to 60th and Nicollet, and there's the Lejeune steel plant there, and if you kind of get on the side of Nicollet in the parking lot of Lejeune Steel, you'll see the rails coming right up to the edge of Nicollet Avenue. And those are the rails that used to come up to 54th. And that railroad is still active from there south. The little train goes up there once a day. It has a couple of shippers up at the north end. As a matter of fact, if you go on 61st Street, it turns the corner and goes west on 61st over to Lindale. And there's some gravel plant or something. They're always bringing gravel and things and sand up in there. That spur used to go across Lindale and serve Bachman Florists. And I don't know when they cut it back from Bachman's, but we actually got pictures of boxcars being loaded from Bachman's. So anyway, another side story on this. So this is the corner. We're looking south on Nicollet, and this is at Diamond Lake Road. This is the hardware store on the corner. And this is the St. Paul Bagelry here where I bought bagels. They're really good bagels. Here's that same view. This is probably about 1928 or so. And so they were ending the line right here. You can see the streetcar sitting in the side track in the Y. And this at the time was a little far as it went. Later it went to 58th and then eventually to 62nd. But this would be Diamond Lake Road today. And I'm sure this is the hardware building, just it has more of a facade. So this is the hardware building. You're looking northeast at Diamond Lake and Nicollet. And there's this interesting little Art Deco building that's there. And here it was in the 1950s, same place. And so we're down here at 58th Street, because for a while they had a Y at 58th. Whoops, wrong one. And this is the same view. You can see all these little houses, and here's the same view with the Y at 58th. And then in 1947, and you wouldn't think after World War II that they would extend the streetcars anywhere, but they did. They extended them from 58th Street to the Richfield city limits at 62nd. The city of Minneapolis had annexed it at some point out to there. And so this is the view from 60th Street. There's the Cub Food. And this is when they were building it. But that's the same location. So this is 1947, and they're starting to pave the street. We're almost done here. Whoops, wrong button. And so they got out to 62nd Street and they put in a loop to turn the streetcars. This is where that is today. And a matter of fact, there's the loop, which turned out to be like the first park and ride lot in the Twin Cities and the inside of the loop. And that piece of property stayed in the hands of Metro Transit until they went and redid the freeway. And MnDOT came in and bought it. And I know because I was the guy who sold it to them. And that was one of my jobs. And is this the end of it? Bingo, that's the end of it. So I can't see hardly anybody. If you got any questions,
I will run out and mic to you so that it gets picked up for the video.
yeah, Joel, and you'll have to see the people raise their hands. I can't see through these lights.
Aaron, I took the streetcar from St. Louis Park downtown a couple times with my mom, and it ran on Minnetonka Boulevard. And then I'm not sure how it got downtown, but I'm wondering if you have done any research on that one.
Yeah, now I got to ask how old you are because that one quit in 1938.
76.
76? When were you born?
No, I'm that old. I was born in 1945.
No, it wasn't running out there then. It was abandoned in 1938. They put buses on it on Minnetonka Boulevard. It was one of the earliest, and the reason it was abandoned, well, first it was one of the really light lines, and one of the reasons it was abandoned was the building of Highway 100, and the streetcar company didn't want to pay to put tracks in the bridge over Highway 100, and so they put buses on it in 38 instead. But what it did do is it went down Minnetonka Boulevard, Lake Street, Lagoon Avenue to Hennepin, and then from there ran downtown on Hennepin.
Any other questions?
Where was that orphanage on Nicollet and 50th? What corner was it on?
I'm sorry, what was it?
The orphanage you referred to.
It was on the southwest corner.
Southwest?
Where the high school and
No, actually, I think I'm wrong. It was northwest. I'm sorry. Where the
Space School.
where the right of the computer.
yeah, okay, sorry about that.
Oh, okay, junior high. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, Tom Dolphin in the program on.
Sorry, I got here late, if this was answered, but just a quick question on the separation of Nicollet at Lake Street where the Kmart and all of that. When was that blocked and what was the logic behind that move?
Well, it was sometime in the late 70s, and I don't know the exact year. If anyone does know, it was in that. The logic was they felt that the intersection of Nicollet and Lake was blighted, and that it needed, and that was urban renewal, and it was the same mindset that cleared out the gateway area downtown. Now, it turned out to be a real mistake, and a lot of people fought it, but that's what they were trying to do. And they had the big offer from Kmart. Kmart says, we'll come in here and we'll put a store in, but we need a bigger lot size to do it. And that was the reason for closing Nicollet.
It's a suburban feel.
Right. But I remember, one more digression, I remember Nicollet was kind of hip, and when I was in high school, Lake and Nicollet was referred to as in town. There were jazz clubs there, and there was a rock and roll club, and I went there with a buddy of mine and saw Eric Clapton and Cream play. and then they went and tore everything down and put up a Kmart. Hey, Peter.
So where do you find all these historic photographs, and are some of them online, like Minnesota Reflections?
Some of them are certainly on Minnesota Reflections, although any that come from someone else's collection, like that 26th and Nicollet photo for Hennepin County, I only put up ones that the museum owns. And so, of course, I've gone out to all the historical societies to get what I can. Plus, there were a lot of trolley fans. There's a little subculture of trolley fans out there, and there were guys not only locally but also from the West Coast, from the East Coast, from Chicago, who came to town, took these pictures. A lot of them, when they passed away, they came into the museum's collection. And I've also talked to other streetcar museums who have them and have gotten them from there. So I'm kind of getting them everywhere I can. But the majority of them are from these trolley fans, and which is why you see lots and lots of them in the late 40s and early 50s. Because when this stuff started to disappear and people had cameras that they really didn't have before, you saw a lot of people taking pictures.
Other questions? Mike, do you have a question? Bob?
That's all right. We got one.
Did they purchase their power, or did they have their own power plants?
They had their own power plant. If you know the power plant that sits on the east end of the Stone Arch Bridge with the 4 stacks, that was called the main steam station, and that was their primary power plant. But they also had 2 hydro plants, one above St. Anthony Falls and one below St. Anthony Falls, that they owned. And they wound up selling those to NSP when they got rid of the streetcar system. But yeah, they did all their own power. And they had their own underground conduit system that ran all over the city to transmit the power. And once they headed for the suburbs, they went and put it on elevated lines, on power lines, and sent it out. They had substations all over the city that would boost the power. There's still a couple of them left. There's one up at Lowry and 3rd Street. There's one in Stillwater. There's one over in St. Paul that are still, the buildings are still there.
And you might as well mention the one that was at Upton and
Oh yeah, well, at 43rd and Upton, and it would have been like right next to Great Harvest Bakery, they had what they called the Harriet Terminal House. And that was the place where the underground conduit transitioned from underground to above ground to go out to Lake Minnetonka. And so it was just a square windowless building that accomplished that, but it was right next to Great Harvest.
Did the streetcar company sell power to,
Anyone else?
anyone else? Yeah.
To the best of my knowledge, they didn't. As far as I know, it was just for their own use.
So you told us about different generations of car barns and terminals, and it raised in my mind the question of how that transition from any one generation to the next happened. Where were the streetcars while they were rebuilding, or where were the buses later while they were rebuilding? How did you manage a process like that?
Well, they actually went through, 1, 2, 3 generations of car barns. First, there were the ones for the horse-powered streetcars. And they were really very small. There were there were like 20 of them, I think, all over the system. Almost every line had their own. And the reason was that horse cars couldn't travel very far. And so when they went and built the first generation for the electric cars, that wasn't a problem because they were built in a completely different location. They picked brand new sites. They only reused 1 or 2 of them. And then the next generation, a couple of them were built on brand new sites. The Snelling car barn in St. Paul was a new site. The North Side one was a new site. The Lake Street one was a new site. So they had 3 that were brand new sites. The one on East 7th in St. Paul, that one was a redo. And Nicollet was a redo. And that's a really good question as to where they put the ones for those 2 where they were redoing them. Right then, I honestly do not know the answer to that. Actually, I never even asked that question of myself. I'm going to have to look into that. Thank you. Anybody else there?
I always remember the overhead lines for power, but did you say they had underground power also?
Well, the underground conduits was to get the power to remote parts of the city. And once it went into a substation, then it would go up into the overhead wire, go down through the streetcar, and then it was the way they completed the circuit to get the power back to the car barn, that was through the rails. The rails were what they call bond, or were welded or bonded. So positive on the wire through the cars, negative on the rail back to the substation. And you couldn't get electrocuted unless you simultaneously grabbed an overhead wire and stood on the rail in your bare foot, which of course nobody was enough to do. Although if a wire ever came down, then you had that potential.
Aaron, who owns today the right-of-way that's on the little bluff on the east side of Lake Calhoun?
That's owned by the park board as far as I know. The city bought the right-of-way from Lake Calhoun Boulevard south all the way to 44th and France, and they still own it. But I never heard that they bought that little piece of it that goes up to 34th Street. Well, they certainly bought the portion of it that is from 34th Street to just south of 31st Street, because that was the part that was next to the city alley, and they actually went and moved. They sold off their old alley because people had built garages on it, and they shifted the city alley over onto the streetcar right away. That'll do it then?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Aaron.